Welcome to the Pardes channel. Today we explain Exodus chapter 36 in a clear and simple way, step by step. Okay, let's quickly look at our roadmap for today. We'll start with a welcome and brief context, then move into the overflowing offering, crafting the tabernacle, some clarifications on the terminology, a few practical life lessons, and finally a quick recap to tie it all together. We're going to walk through the text sequentially, taking our time so we don't miss a single detail. Welcome to Exodus 36. So, to give you just a little bit of context on where we are in the story, God has already given Moses the incredibly detailed blueprints on Mount Sinai. The talking is over, the preparation is complete, and the Israelites are finally about to put their hands to work. The blueprints are literally about to become a physical reality right there in the middle of the desert. Section 2, the overflowing offering. Let's jump right into the very first verse of the chapter and see how this all gets started. Verses 1 through 3 open up by explaining how Moses summoned specific men for this massive undertaking. He calls on Bezalel, Oholiab, and every skilled person, or as the Hebrew text so beautifully puts it, every wise-hearted person. These were folks to whom the Lord had given the ability and, just as importantly, the willingness to step up and do the work. Moses hands over all the materials the Israelites had contributed. Now, you really have to understand what these free will offerings were. This was absolutely not some mandatory one-time tax. The text in verse 3 explicitly notes that the people continued to bring free will offerings morning after morning. It was just a continuous daily outpouring of total generosity, given entirely of their own free will. Now, what happens next in verses 4 and 5 is just incredible. The master craftsmen actually had to stop working. Imagine that. They literally put down their tools, walked away from the construction site, went straight to Moses and said, "The people are bringing way more than enough for doing the work the Lord commanded." The sheer volume of gold, silver, bronze, spun yarn, and fine linen was so overwhelming that the workers couldn't even manage it all. It was actually getting in the way of the build. Because of this, in verse 6, Moses takes a really extraordinary step. He sends a decree throughout the entire camp, telling everyone, no man or woman should make anything else as an offering for the sanctuary. We really want to emphasize verse 7 here because it perfectly summarizes this whole event. It tells us that what the people had already given was more than enough to do all the work. They hit 100% of their goal, and they even had excess to spare. They were officially restrained from giving more. It's just this remarkable moment where overflowing abundance meets highly disciplined project management. They had exactly what they needed, so they simply closed the collection phase. Section 3, crafting the tabernacle. So, with the raw materials completely secured and inventoried, verses 8 through 38 describe the precise chronological execution of the building. The text systematically walks us through how the skilled workers actually approached this. It wasn't random at all. They built it from the inside out. They started with the most sacred, delicate interior elements and moved outward to the rugged, protective exterior. First, they crafted the beautiful inner curtains, then the protective outer tent over that, followed by the massive wooden frames to hold it all up, and finally, the heavy veils that separated the holy spaces inside. Let's look closely at verses 8 through 13. The text says they made exactly 10 inner curtains, but we aren't talking about simple bed sheets here. These were woven from finely twisted linen combined with brilliant blue, purple, and scarlet yarns. And worked right into this stunning, multicolored fabric were magnificent figures of cherubim, which are these winged angelic beings. These 10 distinct curtains were then systematically joined together into 2 massive sets of 5. To connect these 2 giant halves, the craftsmen made 50 loops of blue material along the edge of one set and 50 loops on the other. Then they forged 50 solid gold clasps to hook the loops together. When they joined them, it created one continuous, unified inner dweller. Moving outward, verses 14 through 19 describe the protective outer layers. Over that delicate inner linen, they made a sturdy tent consisting of 11 goat hair curtains. Goat hair was pretty much the standard, heavy-duty material used by desert nomads for their tents. These 11 curtains were joined with 50 bronze clasps to form a single unit draped over the inner tabernacle. Notice they used bronze here for the exterior instead of gold. But even that goat hair wasn't quite enough protection against the harsh desert environment. So over the goat hair, they placed a covering of ram skins dyed a vibrant red, and finally a top outer covering of tough sea cow hides, which is often translated as seal skins or fine leather. Layer by layer, they deeply shielded the sanctuary from the sand, wind, and scorching sun.
Verses 20 through 34 brilliantly outline how all those heavy foundational materials were allocated. To hold these massive, multi-layered tent coverings up, they built upright frames and crossbars out of highly durable acacia wood. Acacia is incredibly dense and highly resistant to decay, which is exactly what you want. The heavy foundations placed underneath these wooden frames were cast from solid silver. The frames and crossbars themselves were entirely overlaid with shining gold. Every single material donated by the people had a specific, intentional purpose in the final architecture.
Section 4. Clarifications and meanings. Now, before we look at the final verses of the chapter, let's just pause and clarify a few ancient architectural terms from these passages. Translating them into simple English really helps us picture what is actually happening on the ground.
Throughout this whole chapter, you'll see the word cubit popping up repeatedly. Simply put, a cubit is an ancient unit of measurement, roughly 18 inches or about half a meter. Historically, it was based on the length of a human forearm. So to put that into perspective, when the text says the acacia wood frames were 10 cubits long, that means they were towering at about 15 feet tall. And when it says the inner linen curtains were 28 cubits long, we're talking over 40 feet in length. Grasping this simple measurement really helps us visualize the immense physical scale and grandeur of the sanctuary they were building entirely by hand out in the wilderness.
The text also explicitly mentions tenons in verse 22. A tenon is basically a projecting piece of wood made to slot perfectly into a matching cavity or socket. The chapter details how each massive acacia wood frame had two parallel projections, or tenons, carved right at the bottom. These perfectly slotted down into those two heavy, solid silver bases we talked about earlier. It's like a giant puzzle. This ingenious interlocking design is exactly what kept these towering 15-foot-tall wooden walls standing rigidly upright and secure against the shifting sands and strong winds of the Sinai Desert. Finally, verses 35 through 38 reveal some distinct design differences between the two hanging curtains that completed the whole structure. The inner veil, which protected the most holy place, was of the absolute highest craftsmanship. It featured those woven angelic cherubim and hung on 4 gold posts set into solid silver bases. Conversely, the outer screen, which was the main entrance to the tent, was beautiful embroiderer's work, but it did not feature cherubim and it hung on 5 gold posts set into bronze bases. It's fascinating because the materials literally visually signaled the increasing levels of holiness as you moved inward, transitioning from bronze bases at the entrance to silver bases at the holiest inner veil. Section 5. Practical life lessons. Now, shifting our focus to the present day for a moment, we can extract some really profound and highly practical life lessons from these ancient events. Because let's face it, the physical building of the tabernacle isn't just a dry history lesson. It actually provides a lasting blueprint for how healthy, functioning communities operate.
First off, we clearly see the absolute necessity of having both the willing heart and the skilled hands. Think about it. The Israelites generously gave their personal materials, their precious gold, silver, and finest yarns. But raw materials, no matter how valuable they are, do not build a sanctuary without Bezalel, Oholiab, and the craftsmen actually doing the difficult, intricate work. A thriving community today requires exactly this kind of synergy. You need both the generous resources of the willing and the focused expertise of the skilled, working together in total harmony to build something greater than themselves.
We also learn the profound wisdom of restraint here. Moses actively halting the donations is a brilliant lesson in leadership. It's about knowing when to stop collecting, actively avoiding greed, and recognizing when you truly have enough. Also, just as those 50 gold and bronze clasps united the separate curtains into a single, cohesive tent, individual members of our own communities have to actively connect with one another to form a unified whole. And lastly, the craftsmen followed the divine blueprints precisely. True greatness in execution comes from respecting the instructions you've been given rather than just improvising when the exact details really matter. Section 6. Recap and Conclusion. Okay, let's bring it all together and summarize our step-by-step journey through this text, just to make sure the sequence of events is locked firmly in our minds. Here is our rapid-fire recap of the literal, chronological events of Exodus chapter 36. It begins with Moses having to halt the overflowing free will offering because the generous people simply gave too much. With those materials safely secured, Bezalel and his skilled craftsmen began the actual construction from the inside out. They expertly crafted the exquisite inner linen curtains and then layered the rugged outer protective coverings right over them. Next, the massive acacia wood frames and crossbars were erected, locked tightly into their heavy silver bases using those carved tenons. Finally, the inner veil for the most holy place and the outer entrance screen were meticulously woven and hung on their respective pillars. So, we end with this provocative thought for you to reflect on.
How can we apply both overflowing generosity and disciplined skill to these sanctuaries we are building in our own lives today? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.